Welcome to this week's panel, and tonight we're talking The Block, Channel 9's reality show, What Really Happened. Joining me from Fletchers, Tim Fletcher, from the REIV, Robert Larocca, and from Woodards, Ruth Roberts, who was there on the block on the night. First one off at the auction, Ruth. Well done. I feel like you're famous now. That's great.
Well, I had my moment of fame, I guess, for about 15 seconds.
Now tell us, it was such a popular show and huge ratings, but a lot of disappointment at the way 3 of the properties passed in. They've all since sold. But what was it like being there on the night, and how did you go? Obviously the property was passed in, Josh's property.
Yeah. Look, I guess it was something a little bit different, and whilst it was very exciting, it was really disappointing on the night for everyone that had put in. Strange environment, doing an in-house auction, and I guess from the moment I arrived I sensed that things may not be as they should be, and I guess it's also evident of the market too. 3 out of 4 selling, that's probably about right at the moment, 4 houses at one time.
And invite only, was it? The people that were there were, which seemed to be the problem. It didn't have a feel of a real auction where, you know, bids coming from anywhere.
Initially we did suggest that it should be on the street because that's Melbourne, that's what we do. But just with the social media, they just can't do it on the street, so they had to do the in-house auction.
Do you think, I mean, obviously the buyers of the first property were in the room and probably the second property, but the other 2 that sold later on that week, were they even in the room?
No.
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 But no one should be surprised about that, I don't think. Sadly, I think this whole thing was doomed from the start. That's no reflection on Ruth or the others. But when you look at it in hindsight, the whole thing was contrived. In a room is inappropriate. In Melbourne, you don't register to become a buyer. That takes out the impulse buyer, so I think that was a big mistake. And to limit the number of people that can actually attend is another big mistake, but that's what they decided to do in their wisdom. But the other very important thing here, I think, that was one of the reasons why it failed, is that the market was pumped up so much on that property. People were expecting it to go a lot more than they did.
We had interlopers from New South Wales that were telling everybody it was going to go for over $1 million. So if you were looking in the 800 category, you know, you thought that's not a place for me.
Look, they didn't really stand a chance from the outset. I don't know how they can do it any other way but in-house, even for the next series. I'm just not sure how they...
I think they'll fail if they do it in-house again.
So you think an open auction?
I think you've got to.
Yeah,
and as hard as it might be, bring the theatre into it. That's what auctions are all about.
Yeah.
Well, I think the main theatre, I think, was all the girls and guys who were done up to look like they wanted to... It was like an audition for the next series of The Amazing Race. But they all wanted to be on TV, basically. But
that was it. It was showbiz, one. It was TV.
It is. It's a reality TV show.
And the vendors did brilliantly. I mean, they made millions and millions of dollars in advertising. The properties were, you know, kind of just part of the show.
Look, it was just hype. I mean, I had buyers even as late as Saturday afternoon sending me emails saying, we won't be there, thanks for the invite, don't want to get caught up in the hype.
Yeah.
And once the dust settled, people realised they weren't being underquoted. The prices were very fair and reasonable. I think everyone got a very good buy. The real genuine buyers came out on the Monday and the Tuesday. And even with the numbers, we could invite, I think it was 50 each. I mean, we're all struggling to fill that. So it struggled.
And Robert, a phenomenal amount of people turned up to the open for inspections, didn't they?
I mean, find me another open in Melbourne where you get 25,000 people, but maybe not a buyer amongst them is the strange thing. So normally, a vendor would have the open, gauge, you know, the interest in the property by the number of people that turn up. But, you know, the vendor in this case didn't care about that and wasn't able to gauge the interest in the property and, you know, use that to set their reserve. It was not a normal sale.
But quite frankly, who as a genuine buyer would queue up? I hate queuing for anything. Yeah. But a genuine buyer buying a house, one of the biggest investments of their lives, queue up, you know, it's just not going to happen. And I know we sold one the day before in Fraser Street, Richmond, for 1.22. Not dissimilar to the double-fronted, and it went like a house on fire.
Yeah.
You know, there's a situation that demonstrates that on-site, not having to register to bid, and a normal house auction where you can bring the theatre into it, worked.
I had one buyer who came through one of those opens who kept in contact, you know, got the contract, the new normal procedure, registered, got to the auction, even sent me a message saying I haven't got my paddle, and I thought, yeah, these are all good positive signs. Mentioned that he was going to bid up to 1.1 and did nothing. Now, they came through one of the opens that we had when we had the 25,000. The rest of the buyers just made contact, after hours, and we showed them through. But interesting, I think, with a show like that, the buyers that were not necessarily interested in the property, but it was the whole thing. Because as soon as we decided early on to try and get qualified buyers, we wouldn't have Josh and Jenna at the opens. So
That's
most people
take the
dropped
celebrity
off.
out of it.
Yeah.
So we
or
did
the vendor at best.
Yeah. So as soon as I said to them, "Now Josh and Jenna won't be at the open," 50% of them didn't turn up because that was what they wanted. They wanted to meet Josh and Jenna. They wanted the whole showbiz, Scott Cam, the foreman. It was all a big package. So the buyers that were coming through, it was all part of the show, that reality TV. But the genuine buyers, they looked at places like Fraser Street and that off-street parking in a side street.
Yeah.
They're out competing and comparing with other properties in Richmond.
And that's what's often forgotten is, through that TV process it's a
Yeah,
normal
we were
market.
saying that. They don't have to buy one of these 4 houses.
No.
They have a choice of others.
And how often do you see 4 properties all next to each other going on sale at the same time? I doubt either of you would do that in a normal marketing campaign.
Yeah, I'd imagine the paddle system would work in a large crowd as
Or
long
in
as
New
they were
South
genuine
Wales.
buyers.
No,
But
not for Melbourne.
But no, I don't think it works
We're
anywhere
too
quite
smart.
frankly.
I mean,
Just
as far as just
sophisticated.
seeing bidders, though, surely if you're going to have 20,000 people at an auction, it's going to be impossible.
But you wouldn't have that many.
But I put it to you, you turn up at an auction with your wife, you've just gone through for the first time that day, you haven't got a paddle.
She hasn't told me whether I like it or not yet.
Yeah, but she'll make that decision
Yeah,
for you
at
anyhow.
some stage she'll let me know.
And she's saying, come on, bid. You haven't got a paddle. And I can tell you, we've seen lots of places in my career where people have actually bought the property, walked in and said, now can I have a look?
Yeah.
Now, if you bring in the paddle system, you're taking away that spontaneity.
Well, there were
It's
people
not gonna
there
work.
that once they realised that the reserves were well and truly in the range, were saying, we should have bid at this.
But they weren't in the room.
But they couldn't. They were there.
Well, they didn't have a paddle.
They were there as guests or there on the night, but they didn't have a paddle.
The hype
and
stick.
after, I'm sure we would have had more people bidding.
Robert, are they good for the industry, these sorts of shows?
Well, look, on the one hand, it's good to see, you on show and have that discussion about property because it led to a weak discussion about the Melbourne property market. So in some respects, that was a good thing.
No, but I really think it was more negative, quite frankly, because the media got hold of it in general and said the market's cactus.
Well, this was the difficulty.
That's the problem.
Because the information was not clear. Most auctions that we have in Melbourne on a Saturday, we get to know the result on the Saturday night. But this was not known, even to the extent where on the Monday morning, the fact that one of them was sold after the auction on the night wasn't clear. So all of a sudden it was a 25% clearance rate, when in fact it was a 50% clearance rate, which is around about where Melbourne is. 1 sold under the hammer, 1 sold after by negotiation, 2 sold later by private sale. That's kind of the Melbourne auction market at the moment, and we were not able to discuss that.
But don't you think it was good though? I mean, it just shows how different Melbourne is to Sydney and how well we do our auctions. It demonstrates that the auctions on the street are just the way to go.
Yep.
And how Melbourne people love their property and also how probably more sophisticated we are in our buying.
Look, I think the discussion, whilst it started off in the wrong spot because of the lack of clarity, was ultimately good over the week because people got to understand the market more. There was time for the discussion and the exploration, and
That was good.
to have 2 properties that sold later very, very well helped show people that the auction system is not just about the hammer; it's about the marketing campaign. It's about getting buyers' interest, and it did that in the end.
Ruth, will you be involved again? Would you do it again?
Look, I would do it again, but I think the contestants choose their own agent, so you've got to be called in by the contestants. So, I mean, next one's in South Melbourne. Who knows?
Who knows? See what
Yeah.
happens. Tim, would you throw your hat in the ring?
On my terms and conditions and on the basis of the way it was run, no, it wouldn't be.
All right.
And I can't throw my hat in the ring because I'm not an auctioneer.
You haven't got a hat.
You've got time.
Robert. Yes. Guys, thanks for joining us, talking about The Block. More coming up on Melbourne Property TV after this.